it really doesn't matter whether you're a black person in the middle class or upper class, or whether you're a black person at the lowest end of the socioeconomic ladder. The bottom line is America has been weighted against black people, so much so that all of us have been affected by discrimination, and even perceived advantages or things that might be perceived as advantages still, for many of us, it still didn't protect us from the overt realities of discrimination.
Yes. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Our thanks to the fine people at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring. We really appreciate them. Our folks, thank you to the people at SPLC. Really appreciate them as well. And for everybody, that helps this thing kind of go along. For all of you for listening and rating and reviewing and pushing the podcast out to all your friends and continuing to make it one of the most listened to podcasts in the state. So, all right. Wrapping this thing up. I guess, you know what, we've gone along for a while. So let's just get right to the right wing.
Okay.
Are we still going bonehead? Are we saying nut again?
I'm cool either way now. I think I have. I'm just so freaking frustrated with some folks are doing. I don't even care anymore. We can call them whatever you want. I don't care.
Well, this particular bonehead wrote an entire op-ed that appeared in the Washington Post and basically advocated for school segregation again. And that is Katherine Robertson. She's running to be our attorney general. Is currently working as the top, associate AG under Steve Marshall now, which tells you everything you need to know about that office. And when I say that, I mean she is basically advocating for the removal of the protections or the oversight of the federal government that some school systems in Alabama are still under because of their behaviors in the past. Right. And, in Alabama, however, a vestige of the 1960s is preventing the state from eliminating racial distinctions in the spirit of these rulings. A number of public school districts remain under orders with no expiration date that require them to hire teachers, enroll students in gifted programs, and enforce discipline, all based on race. Yeah, there's a fucking reason for that, Catherine.
Exactly.
All right? There's a reason for that. And let me tell you what the reason is. And I can tell you one that's happened way past 1960 and one that was happening in 2010-ish. Okay. That's when the Office of Civil Rights found out that in Montgomery, Alabama, the magnet program there was enrolling kids 50-50 race. Okay. And while you're thinking, oh my God, they were excluding white kids to let in the minority black students. No, they were not. They were doing the exact opposite of that. But in some harebrained effort to keep white people enrolled in the school system, because, God forbid the white kids go to school with the black kids, they were splitting it 50-50 there. And they were making it to where these white applicants had way more slots than the black applicants did, even though there were, I think it was 7 or 8 to 1 black applicants to white applicants for the magnet program. And their acceptance into the program had jack shit to do with their scores, because many of the black candidates were outscoring them, and yet the white kids were still getting into the damn program. Okay.
Wow.
That's what was happening over there to do that. And there also was a problem with the Asian students as well, who somehow always managed to get into the program at a rate much higher than their applications, because we were, trying to be selective in who we allowed into the program, because we wanted to make sure that the folks that were at Hyundai and the executives over there lived in the city. All right. That's one of the things that has happened, and it has historically happened over the course of I don't know how long, forever in this state. That also goes into the not hiring of black teachers, the over disciplining of black students in schools. I mean, look, I could go through and point you to numbers and data and stats and shit that would blow your mind about what's happening current day.
all of that stuff has happened in North Alabama, specifically the Huntsville City school system has had problems with that since certainly in the 2000s, in the where we, like you said, about 10, 15 years ago, whatever the case may be. And the thing that I would point to even now, and, since I'm out of day-to-day news reporting and broadcasting, I'll admit I don't have all the stats at my fingertips like I used to for local information. But one thing I do know is this: there is still very clearly, indisputably, visibly high concentrations of, and not just high concentrations, but dominantly populated schools based on race. In other words, to say that a little more clearly, we've got schools in the Huntsville City school system that are still overwhelmingly black. We've got schools in the Huntsville City school system that are still overwhelmingly white. That has not changed, over the past, over the past 20 or 30 years or 40 years that these desegregation orders have been in place, whatever the time frame is. So I would say that to characterize Alabama schools, at least up here in Huntsville, and I would assume in Montgomery as well, and some other parts of the state as well, probably Birmingham, probably Mobile, to characterize them as desegregated is a flat out lie.
Yeah,
it's a flat out lie. Or if she's not lying, then she's deluded. That's not the case. So, to pretend that we don't need desegregation orders when you've got schools that clearly are overwhelmingly dominantly of one race or another, predominantly of one race or another, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What world are you living in?
It's just, it's something that's written to appease and to appeal to the worst of us. Okay. That's all it is. It's to further this idea of the aggrieved white person out there that, because she talks about in this thing about how these gifted programs are watered down because they are, forced to adhere to some sort of racial standards. And really the only thing that they're forced to adhere to is the fact that, your gifted program, the makeup of the gifted program should resemble the overall student body. That's the only thing. And the idea that you think that black kids or Hispanic kids or whatever kids can't compete at the same level is some of the most racist horseshit I've ever heard in my life, man. It's just it's so racist and so evil. I mean, it's just the evil sort of thing to take a position like that is either a demonstration of an astonishing level of ignorance or a level of evil that should never in any way, shape, or form be close to a public service job. So especially one in which you are the top law enforcement officer of this state. I mean, it is an egregious statement to make. And along with this is a real sentence. Okay. This is a real sentence in this op-ed that was run in the Jeff Bezos Washington Post. The state schools,
thanks for pointing that out.
Right. The state schools should be free to focus on the only thing that matters, educating the nation's future leaders and teaching them that the pursuit of knowledge, not racial equity, is the greatest chance at happiness and liberty. I mean, you know what I'm saying, man? The idea that those two things are exclusive. Matter of fact, that those two things aren't tied explicitly together.
Right.
In attaining knowledge and understanding the importance of racial equity.
Right.
That you think that those things are separate and that one is lesser than the other.
Yeah. It's almost like she thinks the world began when she was born.
Right.
and as though there was no slave trade, there was no colonization of Africa, there was no
Yeah.
decimation of the indigenous people in the United States as well as across, or in the Americas as well as across the
Mm-hmm.
world, as though there was no Jim Crow, there was no lynching, all of that. And there was no, there were no. There was no institutionalization and codification of racism to
Yeah.
such a degree in this country that it was designed specifically to advantage white people uh, economically, educationally, professionally, socially, at the expense of people of African descent and of people who are non-whites. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as though none of that exists in her world,
Yeah.
and so consequently, we don't have to worry about it because, that didn't happen. That's what it sounds like she's saying, and that it hasn't contributed to the state of the world that we have today. And
Yes.
anybody who thinks that is I would say for sure, at the very least, very tragically uninformed, if not a fool, if not a liar, because we
Yeah.
don't apply that same logic to things like the Holocaust, for example. We understand that there is a connection between what was done to Jewish people during the Holocaust and what is happening in many cases with anti-Semitism today. We understand it's all on the same continuum. But for some reason, when it comes to black people, for some reason, they're not on the same continuum. There is no connection. What kind of crazy, foolish stuff is that?
Look, it's along the same lines, and I guess I've written this. I don't know where, but I've written it before. It's along the same lines as the whining, the incessant whining about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I get mad at myself every time I say DEI and don't say the actual names, because when you say the actual names, it just it puts emphasis on how stupid it is. And so this idea in college, with the application process in college, and how they talk about the unfairness of white, this unfairness to white people, because there is a certain number of minority students that need to be let in, over here, and students from impoverished backgrounds get this leg up in this stuff, and it's just not fair, because look at what we've achieved. So that's when we're going to start judging the unfairness, because I'm wondering if we shouldn't judge the unfairness back in elementary school, when that impoverished student didn't have access to high-speed internet, did not have a parent who was home at the end of the school day or at night sometimes, didn't have access in high school to the training programs and the tutors and the resources that went into allowing them to achieve great scores on these standardized tests that were out there. When exactly did the unfairness start? When do we get to put when do we get to start the judge on unfairness? Is it only at the finish line down there when they were allowed, when somebody said, "Hey, we ought to take all this other shit into account and not just hand it over to the privileged white person that's getting in here"?
And let's also be clear about something, because class and race commingle a lot of times in our country, and we need to be clear about some things. So, many of us in the black community grew up without two parents and without, financial advantages and so forth. But then many of us also grew up with financial advantages and with, two parents in the home and parents that owned homes and maybe businesses and other things. The bottom line is, though, pardon me, it really doesn't matter whether you're a black person in the middle class or upper class, or whether you're a black person at the lowest end of the socioeconomic ladder. The bottom line is America has been weighted against black people, so much so that all of us have been affected by discrimination. And even perceived advantages or things that might be perceived as advantages still, for many of us, it still didn't protect us from the overt realities of discrimination.
Yes. Yeah. That's, yeah, and I'll say, look, there's an argument to be made for impoverished people in general. Okay,
Yes.
it is
Yes.
weighted to a lesser degree, weighted against people who are impoverished. I mean, if you're an impoverished white person, yes, you have had a number of disadvantages that worked against you. I would
Yep.
say, I would argue, not as many
Right.
as Black Americans, and I would also argue to this the Hispanic folks that are out there as well.
Absolutely.
And so I think that it's I think that those things are out there, and but it just I get so tired of the whining. My God, the whining of white people all the time who have enjoyed so many advantages. And I've written before, about I've talked to people and had these conversations, and I've heard these whines about this stuff. And I've said to them, okay, look, let me ask you a question. Because it often came back at me whenever I said that there was white privilege. That you had some privilege in being white in this country, and they are, there's an immediate pushback from that. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Did you work hard to get to where you are? Oh, well, yeah, hell yeah, I did. I said, was it easy? No, absolutely not. I faced that struggle. And then I'll say, okay, did anybody ever at any point in time tell you that you could not go to this program or that program or participate in this school, or couldn't get a home loan or couldn't get a loan or couldn't get a business loan because of the color of your skin? Ever at all did that happen?
Right.
And I said, so now imagine you've got all the same struggles that you went through, and then add those to it. Do you not understand? Well, I mean, it's just, well, that happened. Are you telling me that didn't happen? Because we all know that happened, right? We all know that that's a reality. Nobody's arguing this, correct? That it was an overt happening for hundreds of years, and then an overt, even after the end of slavery and even after the end of Jim Crow, that it was still an overt thing that happened all the way up until like the fucking 80s, that I mean, I'm saying overt, I'm just saying it was, and now, but now it's still quietly occurring. It's still quietly happening. We still find out from time to time about the banks that are redlining, and the loans that weren't going through, and the school districts that were just a little bit too exclusive, and and the real estate agents who weren't selling to Black families, and and all these different things that are occurring. We still have that quietly, but up until like the 80s or so, it was just in your face overt shit that was going on. Okay. So not even a generation ago, our people, my people, this was happening with. So, and you're telling me that none of that should matter? None of that should play into the factors of fairness anymore? I mean, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Come on.
You're right.
And this, and now we've got a person running for AG who's basically asking for segregation again. And it's just, we heard the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court several years ago say that the South is changed, and that discrimination is not what it once was, and that it has been alleviated and has been solved basically. And he said that in advance of killing the Voting Rights Act, gutting it, and
gutting it.
Section 5, seen what's happened. Yeah, we've seen what happened. Well, it's immediately Alabama put in place some of the most restrictive voting rights laws in the country that never would have been approved by any Department of Justice under any president, Republican or Democrat. No Department of Justice would have allowed our shit to go through. None of them would have. Yeah. And yet here we are, and they're just trying to make it harder and harder. And this is all part of this, okay? And it's all part of this same trend. And so. Till next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.